Is it visible now?
Yes, it is.
That's fine. Fantastic.
Excellent.
Okay, let me try now. Can you? No, no, just a second.
Mehak, is he doctor or professor? Because you
He's
sent me
doctor.
doctor.
Yes,
Okay.
he's doctor, he's the dean, he's the
Yes, yes.
director.
Everything is written. You've done a lovely job. I wish I had somebody like you in my stuff.
Okay.
Oh,
Do you see it large or small?
small.
Small.
Quite small.
Okay. And now?
Now nothing. Now it's large and beautiful.
Okay. Okay. So it's working.
Yeah.
Thank
And
you.
Batya, you are closing the meeting, right?
Yes.
With your presentation.
Yes.
Would you like to announce the next meeting?
No, you can do it.
Okay. It's the end of October.
Probably.
Yeah.
I don't have my calendar here. Let me see.
And it's going to be around not more than 20 minutes.
Right. Even less if possible, so that we have time for discussions. But never
I'm very
more.
short, Lily. I'm very short.
I know you are very
No,
good
very
girl.
short. I mean, I'm trying. You said November?
I think, no, October, the end of
October?
October. I think so.
And this entire
It
discussion.
says October 27th.
Right.
Okay.
And this entire session is going to be 1 hour?
A
Probably.
little bit more. It's always 1.5 because we have discussions and people are hopefully asking questions and
All right.
Mara is here.
oh, great.
Mara started the recording, which I don't know why, but
We don't need a recording yet.
You want me to
Only
start?
when, yes, of course, and let's start the recording when we start the meeting in 6 minutes.
So this will be uploaded on YouTube after a few days?
Yes, not YouTube, on our website.
Oh, okay.
Remind me to start because I stopped the recording.
Okay.
Oh, Peter. Hey. I'm so happy to see you. Wow.
I'm
You see?
looking forward to this. Yes.
Well, that's our first meeting, right?
Yes. Yeah. Well,
I
our
mean,
first facial
yeah,
meeting.
facial,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Right.
And I spoke to your friend. Very nice. We're going to be in touch. Your filmmaker
Ron?
friend.
Ron?
Yes. Yes.
Super. I'm happy. Super.
Yes. And I did a little more research on the family names, and that will interest you because I remember I told you about Mary Kessel that was sent. She was an artist.
Okay.
Yes, she was an artist and a journalist, and she was sent with uh, two other women. Only three women were sent by the English government, and she was sent to because of her art to and she did some artwork, but I think
We will talk.
yeah,
We will talk about it in details. You know,
it would definitely interest
in
you.
a couple of weeks when I'm back. Hey, Sonia! Wow, Sonia is here. Nice.
Batya,
Batya.
I'm sorry.
Batya,
So,
when are you going to be speaking in the United States?
in Washington, you mean?
Yes.
Sometimes in November. I'll tell you.
Okay.
Sonia, מה נשמע?
בסדר, תודה. שלום, שלום.
שלום.
לילי, את זוכרת את סוניה, נכון?
ברור, איך אפשר שלא?
Oh, Dr. Roemer is here. Hi.
I have to unmute myself. Hello to everyone.
Hello.
Nice to see familiar
Nice to
faces.
see you.
Nice to see you as well.
Welcome to our first meet. It's our first meeting in person, right? Or via Zoom. So let's hope that
It does
it's
count. We
first.
can almost shake hands.
Yeah, but you know, a meeting is a real meeting when somebody is making a great hapchi and your face is wet. Then you know that you have met somebody.
All right.
Otherwise, it's fake.
We'll try our best today to kind of
All
get
right.
us going, all right?
Okay.
I think my colleague has also already joined us. Dr.
Yes.
Burza, I see her also. She's sitting 2 offices across, but we're meeting here, obviously, all the same on Zoom.
Well, you don't know what a
Yes.
treasure you have. I wish that I had in my stuff somebody like her.
No. See, some treasures I keep, and that's one of them, you know? We're really lucky to have her.
Lucky you.
Yes, it's tough negotiating, you know? Well, we have like, what, 2 more minutes to give, right?
Yes.
Okay, we are usually we are waiting
Another minute or two.
two after
Oh,
8.
good, yeah, all right.
So
I'll just, if you don't mind, I'm just gonna quickly get a coffee then. I'll be back in 1 minute.
Good. Excellent.
one for me.
Yeah.
Then you are going to complain
Also
that you
for
can't
me,
sleep.
thank you.
Alessandro in Belgrade.
Yes. Still to
Hi,
pay
Rachel.
and also to promote the airplane, but after.
Rachel Colander is here. I can't hear you.
Okay, good evening.
Good evening.
I have a question. The picture, which you have on the invitation for this evening, do you know who is the person, the woman in front of the picture?
Rachel, I'll do it maybe tomorrow. I'll check again the picture. Okay, I don't remember right now. I don't remember even the picture.
I think it's Maria Mandel from Auschwitz.
I need to look at it again and to ask Mara where did she take it from? I don't know. You recognized her? You recognized?
I think so because my grandmother had a meeting, a very interesting meeting with her. She met her she was in Auschwitz, my grandmother, and one day when she entered, when this Maria Mandel entered her barak, at the tzrif, she recognized that she had a hole in her sock. She went to her and told her, well, Frau Mandel, it's not so nice that you are wearing a sock with a hole in it. So she got she said, my daughter is an expert in doing in correcting in taking care of this case, and she brought her this sock with some sewing thread, and she did it. Then a few days later came another Nazi woman with a whole bunch of socks. And my mother had to do it.
They kept her busy.
Yes, well, it's for my mother, it was a second job, because she was appointed as a worker in that factory of ammunition in Auschwitz. So she came back at sunset and started working, sewing these socks. And it took another few days, and they got a whole bread, not a piece of bread, a whole bread. And
a loaf of bread.
Yes, and it probably saved the lives of several women there in that barak.
Wow,
so,
he was lucky.
Yes.
Shall we begin?
What time is it? Just it's 2 minutes after.
2 minutes after.
Wait for a while. Hi, Yoel.
Hi, hello.
Hi.
Hello, nice to see you.
הייתי צריך להיות בהפגנה למען האמת.
יותר טוב איתנו.
אחרי השידור אני רץ לשם.
טוב. גם בשבילנו. לילי, we are, אנחנו עם 62 איש, את רוצה להתחיל?
3, כן.
כן, so I'll start the recording.
Yes, please, start recording.
Maybe it was, I didn't stop it, I don't know.
Okay. All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our panel about women as perpetrators. My name is Professor Lili Zamir. I'm the academic director and co-founder of WISC. And as usually, I'm going to be your hostess for this evening in this panel. But before we start the formal part of the panel, I would like to share something personal with you. Some of you know me, and then they know my story. I'm the second generation of Holocaust survivors, and never ever in my home my parents talked about Auschwitz or Holocaust or anything that they've lived through. And yet, my earliest childhood memory is Yom Kippur, Kol Nidre evening, 1962, Beersheba, the Hungarian synagogue. I was playing in the yard with lots of children, and suddenly shouting, yelling, women screaming. 2 women started to hit each other and pulling their hairs and screaming, "What are you doing here? You were a capo. You are a murderer. You shouldn't be here. It's not your place." And my daddy, may he rest in peace, he opened his jacket, he lifted me and put me on his body, closed the jacket, and ran with me home. This was my first meeting with Auschwitz and Capo, and it brings us to our meeting today, women perpetrators. So, Today we have a very interesting evening and we have fascinating speakers, as we always do. Our first speaker is Dr. Nils Roemer. Dr. Nils Roemer serves as the inaugural dean of the Henry W. Bass Junior School of Arts and Humanities and Technology at the University of Texas, Dallas. He holds the Arts, Humanities, and Technology Distinguished University Chair, the Stan and Barbara Rabin Distinguished Professorship, and is the Arkman Center of Holocaust Studies Director. He's a scholar, educator, author, and co-editor of several publications. Well, if not enough, he's also a researcher of modern Jewish history, German Jewish history, and he also has particular interest in cultural and intellectual history. Dr. Roemer earned his MA from the University of Hamburg and his PhD from Columbia University. He's going to talk today about victims, witnesses, and perpetrators, women's role in the Bergen-Belsen trials. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I take the window, right? There are no flaws in this meeting.
I see a piece of floor. You do have some floor.
I see. Thank you so much. Don't complain. No, thank you so much for having me here. Yeah, let me get going. So in the aftermath of World War II, there was obviously an unprecedented outpouring of proceedings where the various Allied powers sought to hold Nazi perpetrators accountable for their respective crimes. A lot of the early attention, rightly had been absorbed by the British military tribunals, particularly the Bergen-Belsen trial, represents, in my mind, also a crucial chapter in the development of international justice during this time. It also brought to light early on, not just simply the scale of atrocities committed by the Germans, in particular also the Holocaust, but also the critical role of women as perpetrators, as amongst the many accused in the Bergen-Belsen trial were also various individual women. So in that respect, I think it is very different from the Nuremberg trial, which in many ways brought before the court, quote unquote, very high-ranking serious criminals that were defined as having perpetrated crimes in several countries. These men were the highest placed officials of the Nazi state. In Nuremberg, there was therefore not one woman amongst the accused. Only 3 women were amongst the witnesses called to the bar by the prosecution or the defense. So women, all in all, really in Nuremberg had very little roles to play, whereas I think the story in the Bergen-Belsen trial is very different. So let's maybe get there. And then I want to highlight actually partly the different roles of perpetrators and victims, but also this kind of other more silent or partly silent group of individual women who testified on the behalf of the accused. So there are these women who come out as sisters, as wives, as daughters, who are speaking on behalf of their respective accused fathers, brothers, and so on and so forth. And I think they make a really interesting category of participants in these trials that more often we have overlooked. So therefore, all in all, the Bergen-Belsen trials are conducted by the British forces recorded many more voices, different voices in my mind, and in particular, and this is important for us, many more female voices than maybe the Nuremberg trial did. At the Bergen-Belsen trial, women served as accused, as defendants facing war crime charges, as witnesses providing crucial testimony, and also as witnesses to defense. They contributed at times also as legal professionals and so on and so forth. So women are far more visible, really, in the Bergen-Belsen trial. What I find most interesting is that looking at these individual women reveals that there's a plethora of different roles that these women play, really perpetrators, victims, victims of different kind of backgrounds, but then also really of experts that are testifying for either side of the process, and thereby calling also in all kinds of existing ideas about what it means to be a woman, strategizing defenses around calling on kind of the passive role of women, thereby trying to kind of create this idea of the absence of any kind of agency upon women, and so on and so forth. So gender justice plays itself out in these cases in interesting ways in my mind. So the British very much really stumbled quite literally into the Holocaust on a gigantic scale, really, with the liberation of the Bergen-Belsen camp. When the British soldiers of the British 11th Armored Division entered the camp in April 15th, they really encountered scenes of unmatchable horror. More importantly, also amongst the various individuals serving in the camp were also a good many individuals who had actually served in other camps prior to it. So by accusing these individuals, it was not just simply their role that they respectively had played in Bergen-Belsen, but often the roles that they had played in Auschwitz or Ravensbrück and other camps as well. So therefore, a lot of different things very quickly came to the fore. Let me just move on. The trial itself, conducted at the tail end of 45, stands really as the most significant British Holocaust trial at the time. The proceedings involve 48 members of the Bergen-Belsen staff, including 37 SS personnel and 11 prisoner functionaries. On top of the lines were, of course, Joseph Kramer, the commandant, known as the Beast of Belsen, Fritz Klein, the camp doctor, and numerous other male and female guards, both who had served in Bergen-Belsen and in Auschwitz. The British persecutors presented evidence of mass murder, torture, inhumane treatment, both at Bergen-Belsen and Auschwitz. After 7 weeks of testimony, the court delivered its verdict. 30 defendants were found guilty, with 11 sentenced by death, by hanging, including Joseph Kramer and several female guards. So this was a very significant moment amongst, this early reckoning with justice in the aftermath of the Holocaust. But like I said before, it brought also to the fore women in these various roles. And I'm just going to now quickly highlight a couple of those that I find really interesting. So amongst the individuals charged were various individuals who really had been Aufseher and female overseers, Auschwitz, Ravensbrück, and Bergen-Belsen. Irma Griese, the Beast of Belsen, was the most and famous one of the ones. Many of the photos from the time of liberation capture her, and she very quickly became the icon of much of this kind of idea of the kind of female persecutor. At just 20 years old, she was the youngest woman to be executed under the British law in the 20th century. Her case exemplifies how female perpetrators were portrayed and persecuted in these early trials. Griese's background, though, interestingly, is pretty unremarkable. She came from a rural family, joined the League of German Girls as a teenager after working at a dairy farm, entered the Ravensbrück concentration camp as a trainee in July 1942, and resembles really this kind of group of female perpetrators that are young at age, largely drawn into this for the kind of upward social mobility promises, sometimes drafted into and so on and so forth. Her defense strategy involved minimizing her authority and responsibility, claiming that she had been in Auschwitz only for a short time, had no choice but to follow orders, deploying very much the kind of idea that women had no agency in this kind of hierarchical structure, even though those claims were contradicted by multiple witnesses that were called upon, who described her exceptional cruelty. She was accused of beating prisoners with a riding whip made of cellophane, participating in selection for gas chambers, and setting trained dogs on inmates, and so on and so forth. What I find interesting is, it's a classic example of the woman as a perpetrator. But I think what is, in my mind, almost more interesting is later on how the defense case was built by relying also on her sister's testimony. But maybe before we go there, I want to make sure that we also understand that women also served in other capacities, and that's first and foremost really as survivors testified. So they testified here in far larger numbers, some of them the better known one that have attracted quite a bit of attention, some that are unnamed in the actual transcript, some that are named, but therefore there's a good many more survivors who really have an active role in pinpointing particular days and crimes at these accused coming out of DP camps and other places. Obviously, amongst the most, let me just get there, well-known survivors who had a big role to play at the trials, let me just get there, was Anita Lasker-Walfish, whose testimony really helped secure convictions of key camp personnel. So she really stands out, born in 1925 to a German Jewish family. She had experienced both Auschwitz and then eventually had ended up in Bergen-Belsen as well. Her testimony was really critical in really casting the responsibilities as these individuals. She stands out really very much amongst the many testimonies, but there are many other smaller ones coming from individual survivors who testify, in particular also on those female perpetrators, which I find interesting. But the group that has attracted now my attention really, that I thought it's kind of in my mind really interesting, is really the group that often stands, we don't really pay much attention to because they don't seem to overtly attract our attention as much. So let me just go there. So the trial reveals, as I already said, various women who are witnesses for the defendant, who are testifying to mostly the moral character really of the individuals, because they're not, they cannot testify to the actual crimes that they are accused of, because they themselves, quote unquote, are not part of the camps. They were removed. They were the mothers, the sisters, and so on and so forth. But they are going out of their way to testify toward the moral character, the upstanding qualities of these individuals, the good fathers, and so on and so forth. So I find this group immensely interesting because they presume their testimonies from a perspective of absolute innocence. There's no recognition of the wide-scale crimes that Germany had committed at this point. There's no recognition of the destruction that it had brought upon Europe or on the Jewish communities, but they cast themselves really, entirely in these kind of individual innocent roles of sorts. And they, take on various identities as sisters, wives, and friends, and kind of inhabit these various female roles. These were familiar and were core strategy of the testimonies in order to establish decency and moral characters and the likes of the accused. Trying to make the case was more there to plead, leniency and so on and so forth for the accused. So one of the ones that really stands out in all of this is Irma. Irma, or rather Helene Grazer, testified on behalf of her sister Irma, emphasizing largely that as child Irma was not prone to violence and rather timid, almost shy, and that she had been, quote unquote, working for a considerable period in a sort of post office, receiving and distributing mail, and sometimes she had been detailed only on guard duties as far as the camps are concerned. So she really tries to go out of her way to describe her as a very almost shy little girl that never had any inkling toward any type of evil and so on and so forth. She described their family background, emphasizing their rural working class origins and the early death of their mother. She portrayed Irma as a dutiful daughter who worked on a farm and had limited contact with her family after joining the concentration camp service. She downplayed any kind of agency, any kind of responsibility, any kind of power, relying on this kind of characterization of her sister as really this almost shy individual. So I find these types of testimonies really interesting because not only do they kind of try to cast a particular way of thinking about these perpetrators, but they also really entirely neglect on the large-scale destruction, the crimes that had been committed, as if this was entirely down really to these issues of upbringing and kind of dutiful daughters and so on and so forth. And I think that we can kind of read this, in my mind, in two ways. One as a kind of ready-made defense strategy, and it obviously is that. But I think that behind that lurks also a larger picture of a certain kind of sense of a kind of morality of sorts that was perpetuated through these years, so that there was no wrongdoing of sorts. And so I think it's not just simply defense strategy to negate any kind of agency responsibility, but there is really this kind of sense that there's kind of a moral quality to these individuals because of the families out of which they emerged and how they were raised. So I think from the perspective of the perpetrators, what it reveals is a sense that whatever they had done doesn't so much contradict necessarily their sense of decency or morality, but seems to be kind of in line with that. So I think that there's a level, not just simply of kind of defense strategy in there, but really of profound beliefs that her sister was of that quality. She's by far not the only one. Let me just emphasize a couple more of these individuals who come to the fore. Maybe like do one or two more just to stay with my time here. Here's another one that I find is interesting. This is Edith Pomerecke wrote a letter to the Princess Elizabeth of England, imploring her to intercede and seek and review the accusations made against Ernst Kurt Meyer. Anna Schweiger provided a testimony attesting to Ernst Kurt Meyer's character. Edith Quaterneck, wife of Walter Quaterneck, who had various roles in Auschwitz and beyond, and as well as the death marches, testifies as well. Edith wrote multiple petitions for pardoning her husband that reveal not only a desire to defend her husband as innocent, but also a broader sense of victimhood that she felt was relevant to the case. Thus, she not only mentions having spoken with other prisoners of the concentration camps who assured her that her husband was always very correct and just in treating the prisoners, but she also details her own experience to the war, including having her home bombed, facing difficult living conditions with her children, and so on and so forth. So all of these testimonies are part of a broader narrative structure that is built around very traditional gender roles, so women and victimhood and so on and so forth, but really also come from this total assumption of already a ready-made narrative that is negating the existence of any crime and already is building a kind of the beginning part of a narrative of German victimhood, that these families also had their hardship, they were bombed out, they were homeless and so on and so forth.
Can you please sum up, because
Yes.
you're running out of time?
And so thereby I come to my conclusion, which is the Bergen-Belsen trial is unique in the kind of detail of sources that really reveal the various roles that women played in these trials. And I think this last group that I tried to highlight really does tell us something about these wider families of the perpetrators in particular, and their kind of utter lack of understanding in terms of the crimes that actually had been committed. And their whole defense strategy is, not just simply negating the crimes, but really presupposing the continuous existence of some kind of sense of decency and morality of both themselves as well as of the accused, and therefore are utterly devoid really of kind of any understanding of what has happening. But it does also kind of give us a strange sense of what it means to be a perpetrator in the tail end of 45, and that is really to see one's own action not in contradiction with morality and decency. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It was a very interesting opening. And now to our next speaker. All the questions will be at the end of the 3 presentations. Our next speaker is a young, very, very promising scholar, Dr. Mehak Burza. She's a pioneer in Holocaust education in India. She currently works at the program as the program coordinator for online global initiatives at the Ackerman Center of the Holocaust Studies, University of Texas, Dallas. She received her PhD from the University of Jama in New Delhi, and she's really working in many fields. She has acted as a scholar in residence at the University of Oxford, and she headed some global Holocaust programs. So she's really a promising new star in our skies. Please, Mehak, the floor is yours. Mehak is going to talk about the glamour of cruelty, women who held the whip.
Thank you, Dr. Zamir, for inviting me to the speaker series. I have started my screen share and I hope it's visible.
Yes, it is.
Perfect. It was the year 1945. A 22-year-old Irma Greza becomes the youngest female ever to be executed by the British authorities. Decades later, in 1967, a 60-year-old woman, Ilse Koch, mother of 4 children, hangs herself by bedsheets in her prison cell in Aikak. Their crime? They turned cruelty into duty and never looked back. History remembers them not for silence, but for their screams. Now, when we think of women during the Holocaust, we think of suffering, silence, survival. But what happens when we shift the lens? What happens when we confront women who did not suffer, but enforced suffering and orchestrated it? Well, Irma Greza and Ilse Koch are the 2 most notorious female perpetrators of the Nazi regime. To understand how they rose to power and how they used and abused it, we need more than just biographical facts. These 4 analytical lenses help us move beyond simplistic explanations and understand the complex interplay of influences that shaped their actions. Both women came from lower middle-class German families and ultimately found themselves involved in brutal acts of violence. But their paths diverged in key ways. Irma Greza's upbringing was marked by trauma, with her mother's suicide and an emotionally distant father. She left school at 14 with minimal education and failed as a nurse apprentice before joining the SS. Ilse Koch was born 2 decades early and had a comparatively stable start. Unlike Greza, whose entry into the SS was through subordinate roles, Ilse married the SS commandant Karl Koch and used her marriage as a springboard to power. If we analyze the social aspects, we see that while both women were products of a society that rewarded loyalty to the Nazi Party and participation in its institutions, Daniel Patrick Brown writes in his book, The Beautiful Beast, Life and Crimes of Irma Greza. He mentions the recruitment advertisements in 1938, which would say, you just have to join the war, you just have to join and watch over the prisoners, and you'll be paid well. And this is also later mentioned by Elisa Melander in her 2015 work. While both women became part of the Nazi system, they navigated its structures in different ways. Greza came from a rural lower middle class background with few opportunities. She sought status, recognition through Nazi channels, joining the League of German Girls, and later serving as an SS auxiliary. For her, the Nazi system offered a rare chance at authority and social mobility. Ilse Koch, in contrast, came from a more advantaged urban middle-class environment, where access to education and employment was more readily available. She joined the Nazi Party early in 1932 and became deeply entrenched in the SS elite. Her influence, of course, was largely tied to her marriage. Analyzing this psychological standpoint, one can see that Grazer's initial introversion and emotional vulnerability contrast sharply with Koch's assertive and sadistic disposition. Yet, both evolved into perpetrators within the systems of brutality. If we delve further into psychoanalytical interpretation, it can suggest that Grazer's actions may have been shaped by repressed trauma and a psychological need for belonging, whereas Koch's behavior reflects over-identification with authoritarian figures and the protection of repressed desires. Both women employed violence as a means of asserting dominance. Grazer, through emotional detachment and control, Koch through alleged fetishization and gratification. Their motivations were, while ideologically rooted, diverge in their intent. Grazer sought identity and structure, while Ilse pursued personal empowerment through cruelty. The legacy of each is equally distinct. Grazer often seen as a byproduct of indoctrination and trauma, and Koch as an embodiment of pathological sadism and moral decay. It is also interesting to note the differential role of epigenetic susceptibility, neurodevelopmental conditioning, and behavioral plasticity in the violent perpetration patterns of both the women. Grazer's psychosocial trajectory was shaped by profound early life trauma, which can have epigenetically dysregulated her stress response mechanism, thereby heightening aggression and impairing empathy. Her developmental milieu, saturated with Nazi propaganda and minimal emotional buffering, likely facilitated maladaptive stress. In contrast, Koch's behavioral path appeared less biologically primed and more ideologically primed. Her stable upbringing suggests that her sadistic behavior was reinforced through sustained exposure to SS culture, impunity, and social validation rather than trauma-based neural modulation. This comparative framing underscores how distinct psychosocial and neurobiological inputs can converge towards similar patterns of cruelty under the totalitarian regime. Laura Schuberg and Karen Gentry, in their book Mothers, Monsters, and Whores, argue that media coverage and reportage, often even legal proceedings, employ three narratives. And these are women as mothers, as monsters, or whores. For the monster aspect, they write that it eliminates rational behavior, ideological motivation, and culpability from women engaged in political violence. Instead, they describe violent women as insane, in denial of their femininity, no longer women or human. The cases of Irma Grazer and Ilse Koch became emblematic of female participation in Nazi atrocities. Both women were subject to intense media scrutiny, framed through a sensationalist lens that emphasized their gender and perceived deviance. Their portrayals were often oscillated between them, showing as hypersexualized figures and monstrous outliers, reinforcing stereotypes of female cruelty with particular attention to their alleged sexual deviance and sadism. Thus, they became not merely perpetrators, but also as tropes of aberrant figures framed through gender. On 17 November 1945, at the Belsen trials, Grazer was sentenced to death and transferred to Hamelin prison. Public reactions to the trials of both women were marked by intense emotional response, shaped by the horrors of the Holocaust and amplified by the sensational media coverage. Greza, a young SS guard, shocked the public with her youthful appearance, which starkly contrasted with the brutal crimes she had committed. Daniel Patrick Brown, in his book, mentions that when Greza was awaiting her execution, she wrote letters to her family and proudly said, "Even in the worst of trouble, I am loyal to my fatherland." The night before her execution, she stayed up all night singing Nazi songs, and during her execution, she only said schnell, which means quick, and that was her last word. Her execution was widely supported, with many viewing her death as a necessary act of justice. Even after her death, she was dubbed as the hyena of Auschwitz, emphasizing her sadism and role in prisoner selections. In 1962, Secrets of Nazi Criminals was produced by Mainvera International Films. It is a stark documentary revealing the horrors of the Nazi regime through archival footage and has uncredited appearances by Irma Greza during the Belsen trials. In 2005, Auschwitz Inside the Nazi State, a BBC documentary series was released that reconstructs the history of Auschwitz using survivor testimonies and dramatizations. Greza is referenced in the context of female guards and their roles in the camp. A TV miniseries produced last year, known as Hitler's Handmaidens, it's a sort of a modern miniseries that re-examines the active participation of women in the Nazi regime. Its episode 2, which is titled The Nazi She-Devils, features Irma Greza as a case study in female complicity and cruelty. Not only this, the ongoing public fascination with the female perpetrators of violence is even reflective in audio narratives. In 2019, Criminal Broads series hosted by Tori Telfer offered a 45-minute narrative audio podcast exploring Greza's cruelty within the broader context of women who commit extreme acts. The second one is a little longer, 74 minutes episode aired on April 14th this year, featuring host Dan Zupansky in conversation with the author Judith Yates. They discuss Greza's transformation into the so-called hyena of Auschwitz. Ilse Koch faced 3 trials: the Nazi trial of 1943, the American Military Tribunal at Dachau in 1947, and the last one, German trial in Augsburg, 1950. In her third and final trial, she received a life sentence. She remained imprisoned till 1967 and committed suicide in her prison cell. Thomas Jardine, in his book Ilse Koch on Trial, describes that before committing suicide, she left a note to her son, stating, "There is no other way. Death for me is a release." In 1975, Ilse, the She-Wolf of SS, was released. It presents a fictionalized version of Ilse Koch. And it was so successful that it led to the production of 3 other sequels. 1976, Ilsa, the Harem Keeper of the Oil Sheikhs, followed by Ilsa, the Wicked Warden, and Ilsa, the Tigress of Siberia. In 2013, the ebook called Ilse Koch, Bitch of Buchenwald was published. It is a sensationalized yet detailed account of her life, crimes, and punishment. Not only this, we also find a stark and visceral artistic response to Nazi atrocities in the Ilse Koch song that was produced in July 2006. The lyrics, however, were written back then in 1946 by Woody Guthrie, but it was not until 2006 that the Klezmatics, led by Lauren Sklamberg, composed its music and released the song as a part of its album Wonder Wheel. In 2010, the journalist Mark Jacobson published The Lampshade, a Holocaust detective story from Buchenwald to New Orleans. He investigates a mysterious lampshade allegedly made from human skin, and then he just investigates it. However, through his global investigation, the initial DNA suggests it was indeed human skin, but later it says the forensic analysis indicates that it was likely made from cow skin. However, interestingly, a decade later, in 2020, the Auschwitz Museum discovered a photo album framed in a cover made of human skin. The album was made to hold over 100 photographs and postcards. According to the information gathered by the museum staff, the album and the cover belonged to a Bavarian family that ran a guest house. The cover was likely given to the owners as a gift by a crew member of the Buchenwald camp. And the head of the Auschwitz Museum collections stated that the comparative analysis revealed that the content of human skin and were very similar amounts of polyamide 6 and polyamide 6.6. This brings us to the question, are female perpetrators anomalies? Susan Henschel, in her essay, Does Atrocity Have a Gender?, critiques the gendered assumption that women are inherently nurturing, showing how this belief has obscured their roles in the violence. She writes that women's cruelty is presented with a sense of surprise, transgressing gender expectations, whereas men's cruelty is discussed without reference to their gender. Wendy Lower, in Hitler's Furies, reinforces this by concluding that genocide is also women's business. If given the opportunity, women too will engage in it, even in the bloodiest aspects of it. This kind of brings us back to what Hannah Arendt, though not focused on gender, contributes the concept of banality of evil, where she argues that ordinary individuals, regardless of gender, can commit horrific acts through thoughtless conformity when embedded in the bureaucratic system. This brings us to another natural question. Were there female perpetrators even before Irma Grese and Ilse Koch? And surprisingly, the answer is yes. A brief look at different civilizations reveal ample examples. Empress Wu Zetian from China, who rose to power as China's only female emperor, allegedly eliminating rivals through executions and secret police to secure her rule. Catherine, Queen of France, as she was implicated in 1572, and she has, to her credit, thousands of Protestants, slaughters, and murders. Elizabeth, a Hungarian noblewoman, accused of torturing and killing of hundreds of young girls, possibly to bathe in their blood for eternal youth. Rana Valona I ruled Madagascar with extreme isolationist and authoritarian policies, leading to mass executions, forced labor, and widespread suffering. Delphine, a New Orleans socialite, exposed for the horrific abuse and torture of enslaved people in her mansion. And not only this, even after the Holocaust, we have examples like Lindy England and Pauline Nyiramashuko. Lindy, a former US Army Reserve soldier who became one of the most recognizable figures associated with the Abu Ghraib prison abuse scandal during the Iraq War. And in 2005, she was convicted on multiple accounts, including conspiracy, maltreatment of detainees, and committing an indecent act. Sarah Brown, in her essay, They Forgot Their Role, Women Perpetrators in Rwandan Genocide, explores how women traditionally viewed as passive victims in conflict, interestingly played an active part and had brutal roles in the 1994 Rwandan genocide. She focuses on how societal expectations of women as caregivers and nurturers contributed to the shock and denial surrounding their participation in the mass violence. The essay highlights a particular case of Pauline, Rwanda's former Minister for Family Welfare, as a central figure, convicted in 2011 for ordering rape and murder and becoming the first woman convicted of genocide and rape by an international tribunal.
Please conclude.
Yes. In conclusion, and this is my last slide, it can be stated that expanding the frame of understanding mass violence requires a deliberate shift in perspective. By reframing atrocity beyond traditional gender stereotypes, we open the door to more nuanced and inclusive historical narrative that does not obscure uncomfortable truths. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was indeed a very enlightening presentation. Our last but not least speaker is Dr. Batya Brutin. Dr. Batya Brutin is a researcher of art during and after the Holocaust, including Holocaust monuments in Israel and worldwide. From 2000 to 2018, she was the director of the Holocaust teaching in Israeli Society program at Beit Berl Academic College in Israel. She published many academic books, essays, and educational materials. In 2018, she received the Yad Vashem Award for Lifetime Achievement in Holocaust Education. And since 2022, she is a member of the academic steering committee of WISC and a distinctive member of our board. Dr. Brutin is really one of the, I think, most devoted members of WISC, and we are very proud and very lucky when we have the opportunity to hear her lectures. Please, Dr. Batya, it's yours. Batya?
Sorry.
Okay.
Is that okay now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. We can generally classify the employment of women in the Nazi regime in the camps into two categories. The perpetrators, who are women recruited into the SS for police positions in the concentration and extermination camps, and the prisoner functionaries, Jewish and non-Jewish women victims who were assigned to supervisory or administrative position in the camps. Couples, as Lily mentioned at the beginning of our session, are the best known type of prisoner functionary. They oversaw prisoners on work details. However, there were many functional positions. These include camp elders, block elders, and clerks, among others. Prisoner functionaries were crucial to the smooth operation of day-by-day camp activities and were integral to a standardized camp administrative structure. Due to their position within the camp's hierarchy, prisoners, functionaries held considerable power over other prisoners. Prisoner functionaries had some discretion in how they used their power and treated their fellow prisoners. There are many examples of prisoners, functionaries who abused their power and made life worse for the other prisoners. However, there were also prisoner functionaries who assisted prisoners in their survival. Now, women artists mostly portrayed those perpetrators and prisoner functionaries who took advantage of their power and insulted, who humiliated and abused the other prisoners. The first meeting between the female prisoners and the female perpetrators and prison functionaries took place upon their arrival at the camp during the process of transforming from free women into inmates. The first stage of negation of femininity and identity was forced and violent stripping of women by female perpetrators and functionaries. Many women survivors testified that forced undressing in public was disgraceful for them. Elsa Lieberman Schieber portrayed the humiliation of women in one of the stages of the dehumanization process at the entrance to Auschwitz. At the front of the drawing, an SS woman is wildly tearing off the blouse of a woman who is trying in vain to hide her nakedness. Behind, at the center, is another bent body of a topless woman. She too is trying to ineffectively to cover her nakedness from the foreign eyes scrutinizing her body. The next stage was shaving women's hair. Many women survivors testified that the shaving of their hair in the camps was not only humiliating to them as human beings, but also in an unbearable negation of their femininity. Holocaust survivors, Batsheva Dagan, describes in a section of her poem her own experience of shaving her hair when she arrived at Auschwitz-Birkenau. Getting a number instead of a name, that was a source of deep, painful shame. But what was harder still to bear was when they shaved all my hair. My head was covered with stubbly thorn. I was almost bald, completely shorn. My hair, my crown, my femininity. My hair, my own, that belonged to me. End of quote. In the drawing, Tsugangi, new inmates, Naomi Yudkowsky, born as Sophia Rosenstrauch, portrayed the act of hair shearing of the female inmates in Auschwitz by a prisoner functionary. A row of young, attractive, undressed Jewish women standing in line and waiting for the shaving of their bodies and heads in the Auschwitz sauna before going into the shower seen in the right background. In the center, the artist depicts a young girl sitting on a stool holding her shoes, while a prisoner functionary dressed in a prisoner's uniform, apron, and headscarf cut her hair. On the right, a Nazi soldier holding a whip supervises the process. The artist depicted the beautiful hair the young girls had to emphasize humiliation, insult, and a deletion of personal identity. Franz Odell depiction of haircutting process portrays it as a harsh experience. On the right, the young women are seen naked with their long, beautiful hair. In the center, a prisoner functionary is cutting the hair with a shaving instrument and is focusing on her assignment. On the left, the women are seen bald and humiliated, and a female Nazi officer in a uniform and with vicious facial features is pointing at the prisoner functionary, probably ordering her to improve her work. Ella Lieberman-Schieber's graphic and symbolic style shows the sauna capo brutally shearing the women hair in the center, while the woman on the right is already shaved and the woman on the left is next. On the bottom right, the artist depicted a sack of full hair on which she wrote in German, at the mattress industry in Berlin. This highlights the fact that hair was returned to the Third Reich for industrial purposes to make products such as mattresses. And she added, and I quote, blonde hair, dark hair, smooth hair, frilled and braids, a full set of women's hair. They are depriving us of our natural femininity. Women and girls become inmates, numbers. Halina Olomotsky depicted the couple in Auschwitz, dressed in thick and warm clothes, holding a whip or a club in front of a crowd of emaciated women prisoners with light clothes next to the camp fence. The couple is standing with her legs apart, demonstrating her status and potential power. Nina Yerisikova shows a cruel scene of a female Nazi officer standing with her legs spread in an authoritative stance with a whip in her left hand, and orders her dog to attack the helpless prisoner, who covers her face with her hand and screams in pain, while the dog beats her legs. Edith Ban Kiss portrayed a real cruel incident of the abuse of a prisoner which happened in Ravensbrück. As Agnes Bartha, a fellow inmate, testified, and I quote, "One of us Hungarians, Sophie, had diarrhea and wanted to wash herself. Two SS women noticed it. They opened the window in the middle of winter and poured cold water on her. Afterwards, she became very confused and came to the infirmary." End of quote. One of the Nazis' ways of spreading fear and imposing order in the camp was by flogging the prisoners, sometimes for no particular reason other than cruelty for its own sake. And sometimes in order to publicly punish the prisoners by inflicting a punishment of 25 whippings. For example, Violet Lecoq shows a Nazi guard grabbing a prisoner by her clothes and lifting a whip to flog her, while the other prisoners in the background escape for their lives. At Hibma documented the instruments and practice used to flog the buttocks of female prisoners in a German concentration camp. She shows female prisoner lying on a rectangular high table, her head and hands down, as the female Nazi officer flogs her exposed buttocks with a whip. Next to her, the Nazi clerk is documenting the event. In the background, two Nazi officers are seen supervising what is happening. This form of punishment also took place publicly to warn other prisoners against disobedience, as Nomi Yudkowsky illustrated. In the center, she depicted a punishing scene. The female prisoner is in the same position as we saw in the previous drawing. However, here, the female Nazi officer is holding the prisoner tightly while a man Nazi officer is whipping the bleeding buttocks. Another Nazi officer watches the action as he leans against the yellow car and smokes leisurely. In the foreground and background, we see female prisoners who were forced to watch this horrific scene as the couples guards them. Now, I will conclude and say that in this short presentation, we saw the cruelty of the perpetrators and the prisoner functionaries towards the female prisoners, sometimes to satisfy their lust for power and sometimes to please the Nazis. In either case, their behavior remained etched in the bodies and souls of the prisoners forever. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Brutin. It was definitely a very interesting, short summary, and the visual part was very, very strong. So thank you for that. We have a few moments for questions. So if you have any questions to one of our speakers, this is the moment to do so. If there is no question, I have a question to Dr. Roemer and a comment to Dr. Brutin. I'll start with my question. You mentioned the trials, and I was wondering if you are familiar with less important and known figures that were on the trial. For example, as Dr. Brutin called them, functionaries, and what happened to them. If you have any example that you can share with us.
There's a lot of detail in the trial's proceedings, as well, both on the side of perpetrators, of quote-unquote smaller offenders, as well as testimony about the action from various survivors. So there's a whole scale. I mean, the total number of people accused in the Bergen-Belsen, in the first Bergen-Belsen trial was, 43. And so that's the whole scale of of individuals, and that was only the first one. What's critical to these Bergen-Belsen trials is that because the British system required really to make a case on not just on the crime, but ideally also on the kind of mindset of individuals, that there's far more information about these perpetrators coming from both sides of the aisle in terms of the argument. So I think there's unfortunately a lot more in terms of perpetrators in the pile in those proceedings. And I think unfortunately they're really, really bulky. To put it mildly, thousands of pages, and it's a little hard to tease it out of them. But there's a lot more in there. So I just spent a little bit of time with it, but I would encourage anyone to look at both of what's available about the documents, about the trial, as well as the proceedings. The proceedings themselves are actually all available online, divided by days and by the individual accused. So that's fairly easy to navigate. Thank you for the question.
Thank you very much. And now a comment for Dr. Brutin. If you recall, and all of us can recall, Claude Lanzmann, Shoah, Holocaust, very, very long movie, which was a documentary, not a feature film. We met the barbers, and all of them were men, and they told that they were shaving women. And also in one of my previous works, where I interviewed some of the Auschwitz-Birkenau survivors, they also said that one of the most horrifying things was not only to be shaved, and not only your hair, but everywhere.
They
Not
said
only your
bodies.
hair, yes, but the barbers were men. So it was a double problem. First of all, what they are doing, and then who is doing it. And most of the women never stayed naked even in front of their husbands because they came from traditional, sometimes Orthodox homes. So this is something that we should bear in mind.
Absolutely, but since we are talking about women, I presented only women functionaries who sheared hair. But it depends on the camp and the time. Sometimes men did the job, and sometimes in some places women did this job. It depends.
Thank you.
Make a comment if I can.
Yeah. Hi, Judy.
Yes.
Hi.
I would like to, hi everybody. I would like to make a comment that I am from Hungary, of course, and from Debrecen, we arrived there on July 2nd or 3rd in Auschwitz-Birkenau. And my first encounter was, I didn't understand what it was at the time, when one of the prisoners whose job it was to get us out of the cattle cars, he said very quietly, whispering to women who were carrying children or holding children's hands, and kept telling them, give the children to the grandmothers, give the children to the grandmothers. Apparently this happened in every transport with Hungarian Jews who were arriving around that time. It took us decades after that we discovered that this was the Canada Commando, a group of prisoners who wanted to warn them because they knew that the grandmothers and the children will be murdered regardless. And if you don't hold a child, you remain alive at least for a while. And at that time, we didn't understand what it was all about. And what I noticed, mothers held onto their babies and children even stronger, not knowing what to expect. So, and later on, I followed it up with a website that, as you know, Women and the Holocaust. But that was the first encounter, knowing that something was happening. But very interestingly, these prisoners knew that if a girl whose head wasn't covered was holding babies, she will say, I am helping my sister because she has 4 children. And they insisted, give it away, don't carry the children. So, you know, this was interesting how this stayed with me till the very end. And then, in some respect, it prompted me to do more research regarding women and the Holocaust and create that website in year 2000.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Lily?
Are there any other comments? Yes, Yoel?
Regarding your first question about the women functionaries in the Bergen-Belsen trial, there were several functionaries in that trial, I think about 10 or 11. Most of them were men, but there was one woman, Stanislava Starotska, who was Lager Alteste in Birkenau. And she was actually a Polish political prisoner, and she was sent to Auschwitz because she belonged to the Armia Krajowa. But in Auschwitz, she turned to be a sadist, and this is why she was put on trial along with other Maria Mandel and other women overseers. She received, I think, 10 years of hard labor imprisonment in the Bergen-Belsen trial, but in 46, after that, after the verdict, she committed suicide. And it raises the question, how come functionaries who were not raised up in Nazi environment and education, and some of them came from very normal families. We can take, for example, Slovakian Jewish women who became kapos and Lager Alteste. And if we read the testimonies about them, many survivors say that they were worse than the German supervisors. So the question is, perhaps we can discuss this here, how come such women who were very innocent, very young, turned out into monstrous sadists in the environment of the camp? Not all of them, of course, but many of them.
Maybe it's a good topic for a panel per se to understand the why. Thank you, Yoel. It's a very important comment. If we have no other questions, I think that we can conclude. What is it? Why did the couples want to come back? I did not understand. Whose question is it? Can you please ask your question? The person who just wrote a question on the chat, can you please deliver your question orally that we can discuss it?
The beginning of the presentation started with recognizing a capo trying to come to, I guess, a community service and
yeah, it was my introduction. So what's the question?
Why do you think she came?
Why? First of all, because she was Jewish. Then she hoped that nobody is going to recognize her there. But if we go back to Israel to the early 50s and 60s, there were many couples among us. And some of them were hiding, some of them had to flee and to leave the country, and others just lived a normal life in the community. So I think that for her it was very natural. If it's a holiday, and you know, Yom Kippur, the Torment Day, is one of the most, if not the most important Jewish high holiday. So for her, it was very normal to come to the synagogue. Bad luck was that somebody recognized her. By the way, there is a very interesting book, A Couple in Tel Aviv, describing not one, but many couples that were trying to have a normal life in Israel in those days. Some of them succeeded and others didn't.
We can also mention that there were, in the 50s, there were trials.
Right.
A couple of trials, and some of them were women. And actually, Elsa Trenk, for example, who was a Slovakian Jew, she went to jail for 2 years. Others were not acquitted, but pardoned. And many, if we talk about Slovakian functionaries, many of them went straight to Australia and had a community of ex-functionaries in Melbourne, Sydney, and Adelaide. Some of them went through Israel, like Magda Blau-Hellinger, who came to Israel, and then she was recognized by prisoners, and she had to leave for Australia. And others went to for example, a Slovakian Jew who was probably the most famous prominent functionary prison in Birkenau, Katharina Zinger. I wrote an article about her. Actually. She after the war went to Prague. She changed her identity, and even her husband didn't know she was Jewish or that she served in the role of Blockschreiberin, Lagerschreiberin in Birkenau.
May I make a comment?
Yes,
please. Yes. I just want to say how important your presentation was and is. This is the first one I've attended from your organization. But I had a very nice conversation with Batya previously, which helped me and kind of forced me to research something that I thought that she would be interested in. My parents were in Bergen-Belsen. My brother was born in the Bergen-Belsen DP camp. While at Bergen-Belsen, my last name is Kessel, Kessel. At the same time that my father was in Bergen-Belsen, Madeleine Kessel was a perpetrator, one of the women guards at Bergen-Belsen. And then when the English liberated Bergen-Belsen, they sent 3 women journalists to Bergen-Belsen to write about what was happening to help the inmates. And her name, one of the people's names, was Mary Kessel, Kessell, from England. My point is that because of my speaking to Batya, I went back and did some more research and found that one, Magdalene Kessel was not part of the Bergen-Belsen trial, and very little a lot was known about her in Bergen-Belsen, but very little is known about her following Bergen-Belsen. They think that she died of typhus, the way 13, 14, 15,000 others died after liberation. And then I did some more research on Mary, which Batya will be interested in. Mary was an artist, and that's one of the reasons they sent her to Bergen-Belsen. And her photographs are haunting. So something must have happened to her when she went to Bergen-Belsen. So because of your program, I was able to do a little bit more research, and I would love to be in touch with the people that spoke today. And thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much, Peter. And I thank everybody who joined us. We are going to hopefully see you all on the 27th of October in our next panel.
November, I think.
November. Okay. I don't know. Is it November? Might be. Anyway, we are going to write to you.
November 27th.
All right. So we have another month to prepare. I wish you all a very good evening, night, or day, depends on your local time. And thank you again for being with us.
November 27th is Thanksgiving in the United States.
Oh,
thank you, Eva.
Thank you so much. So we have to change it. We are going to change it. Thank you.
Eva.
Sure.
Okay. Bye. It was a pleasure being
Thank
with
you.
you.
Good night. Good day.
Good night.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.